my good friend and partner, Mark Frazier. So today we're going to be talking more specifically about formative and existing communities, eco-villages, intentional communities, and then specifically with a little bit more emphasis on the tiny house movement and beyond. Just very quickly, just maybe as a show of hands of those who are maybe currently living in an intentional community, okay, or are perhaps interested in doing so. And then how many of you may be familiar with, or maybe you live in a tiny house already, or are interested in that aspect of it. Okay, all right. And then for the sake of time, because we are trying to present as much information to you as we can in the shortest time, may I ask if you have questions, just jot them down, and we're going to try to roll through this quick enough so that we allow enough time at the end for questions and discussion. Okay?
Great. I'm Mark Frazier. With Fred, we set up a nonprofit called Open World Villages. This is based in the Blue Ridge. We're sort of in neighbors 2 hours away. We have I think, an abiding interest in seeing voluntary communities get up to speed more quickly than they do and have a better experience financially and in terms of the ways that people live and thrive in them. My background for a number of years was working overseas in a lot of projects related to real estate development. A lot of my work here came from helping into the obstacles we'll be talking to some degree about tiny house and eco-village communities and the way policy is I feel very blessed with Fred as a partner, Dave Ganger here, also of White Lotus Eco Spa Retreat. Fred was the spark or co-founder of the Quarries Eco Village in Schuyler. And Dave Ganger here has a smaller project, but one that's got a lot of kind of vibrant and interesting things going on in Sandersville, Virginia, close a bit north of Charlottesville. So what's going on? Eco-villages are very familiar to most. I present in the room here. But they're intentional communities that have brought people together for living in more harmonious ways with the environment and with each other. Typically, projects range from about 30 to 300 full-time residents. Damonhur, as we've heard, is way higher. Yogaville is also that. But in general, it starts with very committed core teams, and they attract kindred spirits. And so now we see quite a range internationally. And this map of the United States shows the counties that are presently hosting eco-villages. The tiny house movement is more recent. While the eco-villages date back to the 60s, tiny house communities are much more recent. And these are not the mobile home kind of projects that do go back to many decades. It began about 10, 15 years ago to occur to people that they could build quality houses, four-season houses, that were actually very, very small, in many cases quite portable. They can move around. So here you'll see two of the movable kind. This one is legal to drive around with your pickup truck wherever you want to go. This can be driven with special extra wide permits, but it too has wheels. But to give you a sense of how inviting and attractive tiny houses can be. 200 to 400 square feet is the range that we typically are using to define tiny houses. They go as small as 80 square feet, and some people push the upper boundary. Well, what we'll look at is why this movement is happening, where it's headed, and how can we, interested in building the new world, the better world, make this happen sooner rather than later. There are 4 big drivers of the Eco-Village and Tiny House community movement. One is we'll go through them, but the economic trends are getting more and more people ready for living more simply and affordably. Values are changing, technologies are getting better and more affordable, and new business models have come up to make this practical. The economic trends for all who went through the 2007-2008 crash has left lasting effects in terms of people's readiness to take on debt. The jobs are being automated more and more, outsourced. And there's also the rise of the do-it-yourself economy, which means that we're seeing much more interest in finding ways to make your house a place not just to live in, but also to be productive in. Mid-career turbulence and the demographic, the baby boomers coming into retirement also are big factors behind the interest in tiny houses and villages. The offer that tiny houses and eco-villages offer consists of very dramatic reduction in terms of entry cost to owning a home. Getting your debt down so that the millions who were buried with underwater mortgages now have options to have quality housing without the debt overhead. The utilities cost much less if you're in an eco-village or a tiny house community. The smaller size means less maintenance. And this is going to be particularly interesting for people as we enter more and more of us into the golden years, to have the flexibility with tiny houses to have caregivers, whether they're people in the family or other people that we know and trust, to have them nearby, but not necessarily living in our homes. So all these are big reasons for that. Another is the values are changing. Many people have had enough of this kind of atomized life, living in silos and not knowing the neighbors. And tiny houses have the benefit of getting you out of your house much more than in present. So also another big factor in this is that the days of trust in big institutions that are here to help us are in the rear view mirror. And a lot of this movement springs from a desire to reawaken the spirit of initiative and self-reliance and connection at grassroots levels. And then with the fragility of the environment, many people are moving to eco-villages and tiny house communities to be in the spirit of what Fred has described, and we'll describe in the second part of our workshop. For me, my background is in vision policy reform. I've done a lot with information technologies. And it's extremely exciting to see what is in store. The alternative energy costs are heading quite fast now to cross to grid parity. And the technology advances will keep those prices coming down even after that crossover. So this is positioning a lot of opportunity for eco-villages and tiny house communities. Micro-farming, small plot intensive farming is also getting up to speed. In Dayton, Virginia, where I live, there's someone using hydroponics to grow lettuce. And I don't think she's at the, necessarily at the maximum output, but some of these new hydroponic systems are able to produce a head of lettuce in a day per square foot. So we'll be seeing more and more of this, and the costs of entry are coming down. The pocket factories or desktop factories, the notion of having China on your desktop with 3D printing, This also, Fred and I repurchased not long ago a 3D printer for $400, and that's today's version. So it's getting possible to bring the productive things back to human scale, and cottage industry is another big part of the future. Freelance markets. Have any of you used freelancer.com or fiverr.com? Well, it's pretty mind-boggling, but there are now tens of millions of people freelancing worldwide through these reputation markets. They're like eBay. So the next time you need a logo design or something for your website, a 3D model, you can go to a website called Fiverr, Fiverr.com. Yes, Fiverr with 2 R's. And you'll see about 1 million gigs that are available for $5. And so we're at a revolutionary stage now of seeing, with the advent of this virtual global market of free agents, the ability for you, wherever you're located in the world, to tap into resources that in past eras just couldn't have happened. Then the final thing is the access to on-demand learning or just-in-time learning. YouTube has been a godsend for many times when I'm hit a wall trying to understand something, click, and somebody has got a 5-minute video explaining it. Full-scale 4-year degrees or 4-year courses free. You can find 2,000 courses now online from MIT and from many, many hundreds of community colleges. So we're in a world of abundance digitally. So all this stuff is making it possible to follow your heart and find places that offer the kind of quality of life that you're looking for and be able to thrive. So another big driver in this is the rise of new business models. In the past, trying to create and launch a community was, and still is, a daunting thing. But there are some workarounds now, and in brief, one of them is crowdfunding. You can get together with friends or kindred spirits and say, well, we'd like to purchase some land, or we'd like to improve some land, or we'd like to put up a rental facility, Airbnb, tiny house. This kind of thing can be done through contingent pledging, the Kickstarter model. And it also is possible to go beyond crowdfunding. For example, you have an idea that excites a number of people in terms of its potential to demonstrate the values that we share. To put that up, get contingent pledges not only for the funding, but also for crowd use. There's a group called the Free State Project that has 18,000 people now signed up on a pledge to move to New Hampshire as soon as 20,000 people agree. So there's already 2,000 people who move. So the crowd move and crowdfunding is one innovation. Another is Airbnb. And this, in the case of Dave Vanderveer, who regrets he can't join us today, he's at a memorial service. But what he did was bootstrap the White Lotus Eco Resort, Eco Spa Retreat, off of Airbnb rentals. This property that he bought, I guess, 30 years ago, bit by bit, he and Community built it. But it began to take off when Airbnb made it possible for people to come in and do short stays. And as a result now, he's got 7 Airbnb dwellings available. One is a tree house, which is a tiny house on stilts. And he has got 2 sites, which we're now mapping scenarios to turn into intentional community with a number of these elements. The third innovation is fractional ownership and lease to buy options. And That can get pretty complicated, but in brief, here's Pagosa Springs, a bunch of tiny houses on wheels, park model cabins. These are fractionally owned. So those cost about $50,000. And if you have 4 friends, the cost of each having, a good block of time is very, very low. And this also opens opportunities, particularly paired with Airbnb, for low and moderate income people to become owners, for example. If you have 2 tiny houses, or 3 or 4, a person who's willing to be the on-site manager for Airbnb rentals can actually be an equity owner in return for providing the services. So it's a way, an on-ramp. And the final innovation as far as making this go is the emergence of detached condo associations. These are like homeowner associations. But basically, everybody in the community binds into an agreement that says we'll pitch in with time, sweat equity, and/or financial contributions on a regular basis to take care of the amenities and the infrastructure. So this enables the new emergent communities not to be dependent upon an increasingly fragile system of public services. So the trends, one is the number of these projects is blossoming. The regulatory changes to make them possible also are expanding. The demand for tiny houses and self-sufficient living right now is growing. But the bet, I think, of many of us in this room is that we're going to see this unsustainable system of our current economy give way, probably in the, well, pick a number.
Any day now.
Any day now. Even if it's 5 or 10 years from now. We basically borrowed our way out of the last one, and if the dollar loses its reserve currency status, we can't borrow our way out of the next one. So it really is a good time for people to start to think of Plan B if the current system doesn't hold, what we do next. And finally, more and more land is becoming available. A lot of rural areas have abandoned tax forfeited, foreclosed properties. Inner cities, the Detroit real estate, an area the size of Boston has been abandoned. And so the auctions now, for $500, people are buying property in Detroit. The chance, particularly if you have a group of kindred spirits, to get land at extraordinary price, that also is available in many settings. So here are different kinds of tiny houses. Fans of the Treehouse program on House and Garden TV, I forget. Anyway, there are more and more tree houses are coming up, very popular on Airbnb. Here's a Hobbit house, also available, Airbnb rental. This, I wish I had a chance to show you. It's a 7-minute clip of a New Zealander who created a tiny house out of a truck. And literally, you see this truck transforming into a castle with multiple levels and great big spread out areas. So that one is a joy to see. The imagination is happening big time. So here's, this is a $2,000 tiny house built out of recycled materials. The panels and other things, $2,000 basically for the shell. That was home built. This is an example of the greenhouse adjoining a tiny house. Here is an example of a tiny house inside the greenhouse, which I don't have a good interior picture, but it basically reverses what was going on there. This is two tiny houses adjoined by what's called a dog trot. That's an Appalachian invention from the 1800s, but you start with one, and then you put another, and then you connect them up. This is a Canadian company that I think is called Blue Homes, BLU. They will come to your site and it unfolds into a very presentable living space. Here, actually in China, just about a month ago, a full 5-story house, not a tiny house, was built with a 3D printer. And these things lumber around and layer little ribbons of fast-curing cement, and lo and behold, you've got your dwelling. So that in Europe, in the US, and China is coming on strong. The insides can, and Fred will be going into a lot of what options you can have with tiny houses. But this just gives a sense of the kind of living space and floor plans. They often have 1.5 stories, loft kind of design. As far as the barriers, the zoning laws are a huge issue, and Fred could talk in more detail about some of the obstacle course, but county by county, the rules vary dramatically. Some communities in Texas, New Mexico, and Colorado have no zoning barriers. And as you can imagine, those are now high up on the charts for people looking to set up tiny houses. There are also different rules between, in many cases, campgrounds, RV parks, do have grandfathered in zoning for tiny houses on wheels, RVs. And so more and more people are turning to that as a workaround, go into the existing campgrounds and convert. Another thing is that Florida, for example, is now making it illegal to decouple from the grid because they know what's coming in terms of the emergence of alternative energy, and they want to lock you in. So at state and local levels, there are these kind of barriers to the emergence of self-sufficient eco-villages and tiny house communities. Capturing rainwater is illegal in a number of localities. If you, the government says you can't do that, that belongs to us, and we'll sell it to you through the utilities. Microfarming, similarly, there are obstacles to many zoning categories to letting you do that. And finally, Airbnb is subject in some places to a lot of restrictions. So this is a checklist. We've got quite a long checklist on our website of some of the issues when you're evaluating different locations. You can free to download it and chat with us. We'd be glad to offer some help in more detail. So what's happening, though, is some places have decided to stand out from the usual obstacle course and create a welcoming environment for the tiny house trend. But this town of Spur, Texas, has a mayor and city council that said, we want tiny houses, come on in. So they've now organized a whole set of reforms that are enabling people to do that. And the more economic struggles and hard times we may be heading into in the future, the more and more localities are likely to wake up to the importance of creating this kind of welcoming environment. So it's a good time now to get together to model reforms, and that's a project which we're working on, and would welcome the chance, again, to share some insights on new and emerging alternatives there. So when the next downturn does come, there's likely to be a tremendous growth of interest in tiny houses, tiny house communities. And in a way, if one wants to look at it in the crass commercial frame, this is an opportunity for really once in a generation, or once in a blue moon kind of real estate opportunity, particularly if tiny house communities form legal vehicles like land trusts, community land trusts, and go to struggling municipalities and say, we would like to have your a long-term lease on your land for a purchase or lease purchase agreement, provided you will do X, Y, and Z to welcome us in the way of removing the regulatory obstacles. We would be glad to share some of the resulting gain in the land value with you, the municipality, and help provide some of the services which are going to be under fiscal strain. So it's possible to awaken land values dramatically by getting the rules changed, the barriers lifted, and to become attractive for an influx of people. So make or buy is a key question. The do-it-yourself approach easily can take 8 months to 2 years, but the upside is you can save a good bit. If you want to buy a semi-custom art model structure that has about 400 square feet, the cost, we've seen some as low as, what, $45,000 roughly, all the way up to about $100,000. So the budget options are there. Where can we go from here? One I mentioned is to see how we can get a package of reforms available. There's at present no zoning category. There's agricultural, residential, industrial, commercial. Zoning is pretty standard. There's yet no eco-village zoning category. So we'd love to work with communities, eco-villages at the forefront, and put together a model that municipalities could offer that remove a lot of these unnecessary constraints. Two is to look at ways of crowdsourcing the design of eco-villages and tiny house communities with virtual volunteers, with students who are struggling now to find credentials for the job market, to offer them opportunities. If they're into doing market studies or physical planning or whatever, there are ways to crowdsource and then crowdfund quick start plans for the next generation of communities. As I mentioned before, getting critical mass of people together and then making a decision on which of the various options and sites to go ahead with. And then even holding some sort of contest, possibly. If there's some very cool elements of what the tiny house community planning shows, it may be possible to get multiple municipalities saying, we're ready, we'd like you to come. This, again, these are issues about how to make self-reliance in a time of increasing fragility, contractual owner associations, using time banks and hour exchanges, having swap rent partnerships, sweat equity, so that people who are in a constrained economic condition can come in, be co-owners in return for helping in kind of contributions that invest them as shareholders in the community land trust. The very large land grant opportunities globally are within reach potentially too. A lot of my work was on how the Hong Kong and Singapore model of having publicly owned land, socially owned land, could be a source of revenue for countries that are now looking for investment. In terms of those of you who are interested at early stage of looking into the opportunity, would encourage you to go to Airbnb, type in a tiny house, and just see, almost for sure, every state now will have offerings that are close to If you are thinking yourself of a tiny house, deciding what the trade-offs are of putting it on your property or having it as a new location, a Plan B location, or a vacation home, a second home. Check out the alternatives of buying it, making it, or customizing an existing package. Decide whether you want to make the plunge all at once or do it in phases, and map out how you can make the tiny house pay for itself. Airbnb is typically letting you rent a tiny house for about 100 to 150 because it's a new cool thing and a lot of people are checking it out. And that means if you finance the $50,000 park model cabin, that you just need around 5 days per month of Airbnb rental in order to have it fully covered the cost of the house. And in contrast to a typical house, which you depreciate over 30 years, as long as you've got wheels on your tiny house, meaning it's a park model of a tiny house, you can depreciate in this anywhere from 2 to 8 years, depending on how fully you're rented out on Airbnb. This I'm just mentioning, and maybe in the discussion you can go into it. Peter Thiel of Facebook, billionaire, has predicted that universities will be the next bubble to pop. And the reason is that students are going in, oftentimes running up $50,000 or $100,000 in debt, and then coming out without a job and no career path. So one option that we're exploring is the idea of next college, where your learning is free, basically, the online courses of your choosing. You and your friends actually have learned by doing credentials. So, for example, if you're into solar, do projects, digitally record them. If you're into farming, do micro farming and record. If you're into house, any aspect of the house development, or if you're tracking into a business interest for hospitality industry, create your starter home, create an Airbnb business, if you're into marketing, show that you've done that. So the diploma effectively becomes a portfolio of actual things that you've created. And your graduation is not $50,000 worth of debt and no job, but now you actually have equity and ownership in your first home and a business, if you wish to. So these are just steps that, and we'll be glad in discussions follow to go through. But venture formation, if you're taking the business approach to it, then doing the venture planning, funding through in-kind and cash, contributions, marketing, promoting, doing then the startup of a tiny house or a village community. Open World Village is still very new, but our aim as a nonprofit is to create a whole set of resources and tools that will help the next generation of tiny house communities and things like that. So these are backgrounders on how to reach us. Fred is in easy range, I think, of anyone here in this part of Virginia. I am doing policy reform projects internationally as well as locally. And Dave Vanderveer is, again, a wizard in terms of the Airbnb issues. So we invite you to connect. And I do have some other slides here that get into the ways of seeding tiny house and retention communities worldwide through digital donations, and how they can scale from being a very small initial development to much larger examples of the next economy, and how this potentially could be a self-supporting system. that if we have community land trusts that pay forward ethos in terms of spreading, that what works, sharing the experiences are, that this in fact can lead to the kind of emergence of a new world. Thank you.